You are listening to Terror in Wichita. Please follow along to hear a Q&A with the author, Paul Caranci. Follow along to hear how he became an author and his thoughts on this horrible crime.
Didn't set out to write a book. I was simply trying to highlight some of the historic sites in our town, some of the historically significant points of interest, so that people would have a little walking tour that they could take on their own, using my pamphlet as a guide. My wife and I put it together, and when it was all done, it was just center stapled. It wasn't a book or anything. But when it was done, it was of significant size, and I found out that we had so many historical sites of interest in the town and so many significant people. Zachariah Allen and Daniel Lyman and even Samuel Slater and some other very significant people that I wanted to bring that to the superintendent of schools to see if they might be interested in teaching local history to the students in the high school that were taking a history course. He was very interested, but said, well, we don't have a book to give to the students. We don't have a teacher's guide that the teacher could use to teach such a course, so it'd be difficult. Well, I offered to write one and asked if that would suffice. He said yes. So I set out to write a book that would detail the sites similar to what I had in the pamphlet, but also include maybe 12, 15 biographies of historically significant people. And I did that. And when I did, I had promised that I would give the high school 100 copies for nothing. They could then give to the students to use as a textbook, and I promised to also write a teacher's guide. When I got an email, unsolicited email from the History Press, and it said, do you know anybody that writes local history? We publish it, and fill out this questionnaire and send it back to us. So I did. I filled the questionnaire out and described what I had put together. I sent it off to them on a Sunday. And the very next day, Monday, I got a return email from the History Press saying that they loved the idea of biographies attached to a walking tour. It was rather unique. They hadn't done it before, and they wanted to publish it. So I became a published author at that point. Well, Terror in Wichita wasn't written in the same fashion as the other books I've written. First, writing this book wasn't solely my idea. Zig Gorthier, a Hollywood producer, had purchased the movie or documentary rights to some of my other books, and he called and asked if I had ever heard of the Wichita Horror. I had not, so he asked me to Google it and to get back to him. So I did, and I was quite shaken by the story. The subject matter was difficult to write about. I'd written about the life of prisoners in Dachau, the concentration camp in World War II, before this. And while the prisoners' treatment was obviously horrible, it happened far away and during war. So these crimes, the ones in Terror in Wichita, were committed against people who were just going to bed in their own home, and that's something that could happen anywhere, anytime, and to just about anyone. For H.G. and her friends, home just happened to be the wrong place at the wrong time. So I think that knowing that makes the crimes much more personal. Well, because of the horrific nature of the crimes that include multiple counts of kidnapping, carjacking, rape, murder, torture, even animal cruelty was thrown in, the brothers were sentenced to death. The Kansas Supreme Court reversed the death penalty, but the United States Supreme Court reinstated it and threw the case back to the local courts. But they still sit on death row currently. It's been 24 years since the crimes were committed, And usually, the appeals process will run 20 years. Theirs is a little bit longer because it was initially overturned and went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which takes longer. But they also went back to the Supreme Court, or tried to go back to the Supreme Court in 2023. And at that point, the Supreme Court refused to hear their case. So they're now like 43 and 46 years old as they sit on death row. And they have a number of appeals left, but they're primarily the small appeals, ineffective counsel, that kind of thing. One of the cases was tossed in 2023 by the Kansas courts, where the judge refused to hear it. The most recent appeal that they took on was in April of 2024. That case was not even considered by the Kansas Supreme Court. So as of right now, they still sit on death row. I would expect nothing to change. But at the very least, if for some reason they're removed from death row, they still have life sentences that they would have to contend with. So I don't expect them to get away with the crimes, and I don't expect to see them out in the streets anytime soon.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jason Lamb. Thank you for choosing KSN News at noon. There is a status hearing happening today for two brothers convicted of capital murder. We're talking about Jonathan and Reginald Carr. They're convicted of abusing and terrorizing 5 people, killing Aaron Sander, Brad Haka, Heather Muller, and Jason Befford. And another woman survived the attack. They also killed Ann Walenta and robbed another man during their week-long crime spree in December of 2000. The Carr brothers were sentenced to death in 2002. Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the brothers' appeal, exhausting their direct appeals. The Kansas Supreme Court then sent the cases back to Sedgwick County. The district attorney said the next step is for indirect appeals. Both brothers have filed 2 motions, one claiming they had ineffective counsel during the trials, the second to seek a new sentencing hearing. Today's hearing is considered a status conference to determine next steps for the attorneys to argue for the motion for a new sentencing hearing.
Thank you for listening and following along. A special thanks to Paul Caranci, Max Bowen, and Skylar Batz for producing and editing. For more information, please visit Paul Caranci's website or find him on social media. To find Paul next, go to paulcaranci.com. If you'd like to follow his social media, you can find him on Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and Facebook. To hear and listen to his new audiobooks or new podcast, follow him on Spotify and SoundCloud. Thanks for listening. Produced and edited by Studio 121 in Providence, Rhode Island.